Welcome to the Truer Business Podcast with Cara Ferreira
and Lauren Van Mullum. This season, we're looking at how online entrepreneurs built businesses around what they wanted for their lives.
We're talking to people who broke out of the follow my formula mindset to find what worked for them so that you can find the way that works for you.
What do you really want? As soon as we started talking about doing this podcast, I knew there was a client that I really wanted to talk to because she has built her business with a very similar trajectory to how we've all built our businesses. Starts with burnout and it ends with a business that she's created that serves her and her energy and her needs and her desires. And she's done it also beautifully. So we finally got to have her on today, and let's introduce Steph Williams.
Yeah, no, it's really been a big theme, right, of this entire series has been the burnout. So she had a lot of great tips. Steph Williams used to work in child protective services in Australia for 14 years, a field with incredibly high burnout rates. The high stress work took its toll, and she knew she needed a shift. So she left her job, slowed down, way down, and pared down her life to a cottage by the beach. And that is where she created her business, The Rested Woman. Now she helps overwhelmed women to rest and reevaluate how they're spending their energy so they can get clear on what matters and get out of burnout for good. You can find her online and on Instagram at stephwilliams.co. So let's jump into the episode.
Stephanie, I'm so excited to have you on because I think you have one of the richest, most interesting, and most relatable backstories. And then how you've transitioned that backstory into what you do now. It's so seamless. And I should also preface all of the questions with burnout has been the unofficial theme of this season.
Yeah, and my career historically. So that's great.
Exactly. So you're the perfect person to talk with about burnout and the aftermath and the things you can build out of it, because that's kind of how your business happened. So I hate to ask this because it's such a big, but please tell us from the very beginning your whole life story. No, we can start with the job.
Yeah.
And you can give as much or as little information as you feel comfortable with, but you had, as many of us entrepreneurs have had, a job that started it all.
Yeah, I feel like it's the origin for so many of our stories, right? So it seems like it's completely opposite to what I do now, but as you mentioned, like it's really tied into everything that's become my business now. So my background was 14 years in child protection services in Australia. So I guess I worked my way up from the very bottom of that and ended up becoming a senior manager. So similarly to corporate, like managing people across different regions. Obviously, the nature of the work that I was doing was super intense. So really complex trauma that we're working with and multi-generational trauma across families. So it took its toll. So the burnout rate, and I don't know what it is in America, I imagine it's quite similar, but for here, the burnout rate for people in that industry is 2 years. So I feel like I was quite the veteran and I wore the badge of honor pretty heavily to my own detriment in the end. But basically, you know, as time progressed, the toll of that work really started to pull on me. And I think for so many of us, COVID was this reflective mirror that got held up in all of our faces to really look at what does our life look like. And I guess the forced slowdown that COVID brought for so many of us. So, you know, we're locked in our homes. We don't have that long commute anymore. Like a whole bunch of factors contributed to me basically acknowledging that work was starting to make me sick. So I developed a stomach condition where I was like throwing up all the time. And I just normalized that as, my stomach's just not okay today. And, constantly walking around, I always used to say like, it's like my shoulder was my sign. If that started to creep up like an earring, that was telling me I'm not okay. I'm really stressed, but I was ignoring all of those sort of symptoms that would pop up for me. struggling to sleep. Like, so many of us, when we're really in that high intense burnout phase, sleep starts to slip, and the anxiety and the jaw locking and fingerprints in my hand from clenching all night, like all of these symptoms started to really get quite intense across COVID, and I started to notice them. And it wasn't until we kind of started to go back into the office, and I was holding everyone else's burnout, obviously, because as the manager, we hold everyone else's stuff. And so once I got a few days back in the office, I ended up coming home on Friday, and my partner and I lived in this big house that was about an hour's commute. And on top of, I guess, being stressed at work, I was managing this household because my partner worked away, and I felt like all I did was work or clean. And it was just not the kind of lifestyle I really wanted to be living. And I just walked in the door and I just busted into tears and looked at him and I was like, I feel like I'm freaking drowning and no one can hear me screaming. And of course, he had no idea that I was this unwell and in such a bad place, because we all, have burnout with a smile. And so I guess that's where he said to me, like, something's got to shift. You can't stay in this work. I can see that you're really stressed. I didn't realize how bad things were. And I kind of let the mask slip finally. And having someone else, because I couldn't share these things with my staff, having my partner go, you're not okay and you can't keep going, was really the wake-up call that I needed. So I guess time sort of progressed, the world opened back up again, and all the opportunities started to arise to go, well, what next? So my partner and I, because he's Irish, we went back to Europe to see his family finally, because we hadn't seen them in a few years. And when I came back, my company offered me a redundancy, which basically in Australia says, here, let's pay you out because we no longer need this position, or you can restructure and go into this position. And I was like, money. So that was kind of, I think, the universe telling me, here's an influx of cash to inject into your next path in life. So I took the redundancy and I took a couple of months off work and I started to build a business, but it was not straight away. I knew I wanted a business. I knew I'd studied coaching and positive psychology and the chaos of all of this trauma work. And I wanted to do something with that. But at the time, I didn't quite know what it was, because my whole identity was Steph, the social worker, Steph, the child protection worker. And it's so often that people sort of say to us, oh, who are you? What do you do? And that is our identity so much. So I had to unravel who I was from that role. And that was done through a lot of, I guess, really intentional slowing down everything in my life. So my partner and I got rid of the big house. We moved into this tiny little beachside villa, and I spent most of my time on that beach across the road. And we got rid of any crap in our house we didn't need any longer. So if we didn't want to clean it, it wasn't staying. And we just sort of started to pare everything down, and I started to spend a lot more time in nature. So I'm an Aboriginal woman, so nature and culture is a huge part of my life that I disconnected from. And so that was really important for me to spend that time reflecting outside. And I started to slowly put together that I want to help the women who I once was, the woman who was burnt out, who was really, really stressed and had no idea how to actually stay still or to rest or to just be without feeling completely guilty about it. And that sort of started to develop my business.
The first incarnation, because we're on the evolution of your business, but I'm fascinated by the first incarnation of a business and how it starts to evolve into what it really wants to become. I'd love to know, because I like version 1, slow living liberation, like slow living was the central message. How did it go from there to what it is now?
So I think that a huge part of my own healing journey was embracing a slow living lifestyle. And really, I think that goes hand in hand with minimalism. So it's paring back everything in my life. And it wasn't just stuff in my house. It was, what am I consuming? What's on my phone? How much tech time am I having? How much time am I actually blocking all of that out, that overstimulation constantly that doesn't allow us just to stay still for a minute. And so I wanted that to be the focus of my work because I just know the power of being able to slow down and actually start to invest our energy into the things that we really find joy in rather than just going through the motions of every day. So that kind of became, I guess, the center of the work that I wanted to do with people. And then over time, I guess in my own business journey, I found a new kind of busyness at the same time. And I often joke with Lauren that like I put on 15 kilos, which is I think like 30 pounds building a wellbeing business, which I think is really ironic. And so it was a weird kind of busy though, because historically my busy was really stressful and it was intense and it was chaotic. Whereas this was like, I was operating in a different zone of busy now. Like I was really enjoying building this business. I was so energized and excited and there was projects and ideas coming out of everywhere. So I just shifted into a new gear of busy. And I was far more well, for sure, but I mentally and emotionally, but physically, obviously had been eating lots of cookies while working and not exercising like I used to. And that time outside started to slip. And I kind of had to recenter myself again to say, I'm struggling to stay still because I do love my business and I want it to be successful and I want it to be amazing and I want to reach as many people as I can. And I've now, yeah, as I mentioned, like switched into this new kind of busy, which is also not healthy.
We have all been there.
Right.
Yeah, like, you're lying on the couch and you're like, okay, I'm going to relax now. I'm going to spend some time with my partner and we're going to talk. And you're like, oh, and then I had this idea and then you run back to the laptop. It's still, I guess it's not conducive to what I want my life to look like, I don't like the word balance. I think it's a joke. I think that we can be all in for a period on different elements of our life, but there needs to be a healthy way to blend all the different aspects of our world. And that kind of started to, as I said, like shift that evolution of my business where I was like, I think slow living and nature-based healing are still so important and they're philosophies within my business. But I think that over time, I've realized that the deeper work that needs to be done is how do we release stress and learn how to rest without feeling guilty about it.
Yeah, because rest is the key to being able to do anything else.
Now, as you're telling your story, I was wondering, I was like, how do you go about building a business in a slow living way? And it sounds like you had to sort of wrestle with, you just shift that gear into the different kind of busy and then have to find those tools to make sure that you were actually finding time to restore.
And it was a roller coaster. I'd go through periods, right, where I was like, oh, yeah, this is perfect. I feel really balanced and I feel like my mental health is brilliant and I'm doing passionate work that's meaningful. But then there were other times when, I would slip into that mode of busy chaos, but just in a really different way.
So there's it's not quite a meme, although it could be, but it's definitely this thing that everybody knows happens when you transition from like your very busy day job and you dive into your own business. And I swear there's two types of people. One type of person, they'll be like, I'm setting my own schedule. There is nobody holding me accountable to do anything. And they will freeze and like stay on the couch and just shut down, probably because they're exhausted from the job that they just left. But then the other kind of person is, they were probably a little type A to begin with, and they did 110% their day job, and they go in and they are the most brutal self bosses to themselves. And they take all of that energy and all of that propensity to burn out, and then they put it into their business, and it works really well for about 3 months, and then they crash. Like this is it's such a trope. It's such a thing that happens. I think I did that in the beginning. And then I think I did it again in the pandemic when I was switching niches. I was very hard on myself. And during the pandemic, because we couldn't exercise, we couldn't go to the gym. they wouldn't let us go hiking. It was bananas.
God, yeah.
Right? And now we know hiking probably was fine. But yeah, oh my gosh, the toll it took on my health and my strength. It's taken me until this year to recover.
We're conditioned to think that like rest is laziness and busyness equals success. We're just programmed that way. And at the heart of all of our burnout issues for women, I think comes like this lack of boundary for ourselves and with other people.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, the people pleasing journey. Oh my
I'm
God.
going to say no.
I mean, that's kind of been like how I've gotten my business from kind of terrible and miserable to being amazing is you've just got to peel away those layers of the people pleasing instincts. I think that's the hardest work we do as entrepreneurs, as women entrepreneurs. What about you, Kara? Did you have that phase?
Yeah, no, I had the complete hustle in the other direction phase. I left, working for the United Nations because I was burnt out. And then in building my business, I just completely overscheduled myself. And like, I do believe I still put my tasks on my calendar and it still is kind of like, well, it's kind of wall to wall, except for in the middle of the day, it's like a fun thing. Whereas before it was like wall to like way past the time I actually wanted to be working with just like client activities. I felt like I had to because I needed to bring in the money and I couldn't say no to any of the projects, but I probably could have found that.
Imagine you added a survival pocket in the middle of the day though.
Right. Well, that's kind of how I do it now. Like I make time because I learned, I was like, I'm going to go to the gym, but I'm going to have work activities scheduled from 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. And somehow I'm going to go to the gym magically in the middle of the day. Didn't work. Whereas now I'm like, okay, what are the things I want to do? Like walking the dog in the mornings on my calendar, actually. And then usually there's a good hour and a half chunk at least for horseback riding in the middle of the day too. So
I love that though, because how often do we schedule all of our meetings and all of the things we have to do, and why aren't we scheduling the things we actually enjoy and the rest in the pockets just to breathe and to walk the dog and to eat lunch even? You forget to schedule those ones. So I love that for you, Cara.
My business coach gave me the hardest time because she saw my Google Calendar and she's like, there are no breaks in here. There is no lunch hour in here. What are you doing? Like, what are you actually doing? And so now my Google Calendar is beautiful and perfect. And I really impressed my VA this morning because I showed her my Google Calendar and she's like, this is so neat and tidy and organized. I don't think I've ever seen any Google Calendar this organized. And I'm like, it took me 15 years to get here.
But you made it.
Yes, I finally figured it out. And I finally stopped overscheduling myself because of the shedding of the people pleasing. So I'm really curious what your ideal calendar looks like now with a slow approach to business, because we're talking, more about bringing a slow living and a rested approach to women who are burnt out with their 9-to-5 jobs. But how do you apply that to your own business?
I think that anyone doing coaching, counseling, there's kind of this narrative out there that you should do like A, B week. So you're seeing clients one week, off week, the next week where you're doing admin. And I tried that. I really tried to force myself into that round hole, and that just was not for me. So I think that it's about looking at energetically, what does that look like for you? So I know that every morning I'm going to be awake super early and I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to go to the gym before the day even starts. And I feel best when I get that done, because then by 5 p.m., I know that at least if I do nothing else physically, that I've got those out of the way, and that makes me feel energized throughout the day. So that's really important for me, that I leave that space in the morning really free. And I'm really energetic in the morning. And then by about 3 p.m., there's a sharp nose dive for me where I just don't feel like, because I'm quite an extroverted introvert, like that. For me, I sort of go into my own shell and I just sort of need me time. I need to do really slower activities or admin-based tasks. So I see only clients for the most part in the morning. I have like one day where I do the afternoons, but I mostly see clients in the morning, including on Saturday morning. So I try to just structure my energy around the tasks that I'm trying to do. And I also have a thing called a brain break, similar to Car in the middle of the day, where it's not even lunch. It's literally just I need a brain break, and I always step away from my computer. So a big thing, I guess, for me when I was working in child protection was that lunch was kind of this thing I scoffed at my desk while I was trying to type at the same time. So I'm really particular about making sure that if I am having a break, I'm stepping away and I actually go outside. Yesterday, I had one of those days yesterday where, when you've just got so many things on the to-do list that you just kind of get a little paralyzed, or you start just procrastinating and doing lots of different things at the same time, which is really unhealthy for us. So I now sort of am really strong in my boundary that if I'm feeling like that, I actually get up and I go for a walk. So I went for a walk the day yesterday, and I came back significantly more centered than I was when I left, and being okay with the fact that some days I'm just not going to have the energy that I will on other days, and the focus, and sort of leaning into all the different seasons of how I'm feeling.
So many amazing things in what you just said.
Yeah. That felt really nice to be like, just the permission slip. Like if you just are feeling that crush of overwhelm, just like get up and step away.
Yeah. And it's so hard because the natural urge, I think, for so many women is keep pushing, and
right.
And I don't often sort of overschedule myself, but the last couple of weeks have been bananas, and the next couple of weeks have as well are set up to be that way. And that's my own mistake. And I think because I'd been sick, I kind of rescheduled everything, not realizing. So it was one of those days where I was like, I really don't have time to be able to take a break and go for an hour walk, but I had to prioritize that because nothing else was going to be productive for the rest of the day.
Right. No, you just end up hurting yourself.
That's how I feel about taking naps. It's like if I know the afternoon is just going to be a wash of me staring at the screen, trying to function and not making it, that's when I need a nap.
Yeah. It was otherwise, like, I'll do that where I'm like, I don't feel like working right now, but I have to work. And so I find some busy task that isn't moving the needle forward that makes me feel productive. Whereas if you just step away and come back, and plus, as I guess, solopreneurs, a lot of things we think like it's imaginary deadlines. Like I made a deadline for a thing myself. Like I can shift it by a day if I need to.
Yes. As Steph knows, I'm very guilty of shifting deadlines. Which, is a direct response to, do I have energy to bring my best brain to this, my sharpest brain, or has my sharpest brain decided to leave? Because it does that sometimes.
I don't think that's okay. I can, and saying to the person that you're working with, hey, I want to be there as the best version of me for you, and I just can't give you that today. Can we do this instead? Why is that not okay?
It's so embarrassing.
People
it's a point of pride. Like, of course, I'm always on the ball, super sharp, absolute genius, every day, all day. No, not at all.
We are all just humans, and sometimes we need space to just not be okay in that moment.
I want to ask about the nature aspect of your work, because you talk about, nature, healing, just being out in nature as being so central to your own life and to your approach to your work. And I don't know if I've ever asked you about that specifically and really concentrated on it, but I am fascinated by it because I am also I'm very nature-based. Like I get my energy from my garden, from the land, and then I forget to go out in my garden and I forget to go out for walks and hikes and I suffer for it. And then I figure out why.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's exactly it, right? Like our whole world is evolving to be behind a screen at all times and to be inside at all times. And we weren't born to live that way. That's not how our ancestors lived, and that's not how my ancestors lived. And for me, nature is that ultimate reminder, like nothing in nature ever hurries or it has seasons of change. It has seasons of healing. It has seasons of slowing down, being still, resting. So I think it's this beautiful reminder when we go outside that everything sort of slows down for a minute. If we actually don't put the headphones in and have the podcast going, which is totally fine. I do that often. But when I'm really needing to connect, there's no tech. It's like being able to just slow the world down and tune out all of that noise just for a little while. And I often say, like, and I'm so glad you mentioned garden, because, busy mums or working mums particularly are like, that sounds lovely, but I don't have time for that, and it doesn't have to be a 2-hour walk in nature. You could literally just have your cup of tea before the kids get up and walk outside and ground your feet into the earth. And that's enough. Sit by your pool and like watch the clouds float by without your phone or your emails first thing in the morning. 10 minutes having a coffee break in the afternoon to walk outside and get the sunlight onto your face. That we know that how much impact, I guess, sun in particular has on our health and well-being. So I think it doesn't have to be complicated, but it's such an amazing healing, natural healing space for us to get away from tech and get outside.
So is this now the bulk of your work, sort of just coaching other women through building in these practices, stripping away things they don't need? Like, what is some of that typical things you're working with people on? Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been blending. So I did my ICF coaching, and I have a particular style of coaching that I like to use, as well as blending some holistic counseling sort of modalities together. And yeah, the work is around how do we unravel that conditioning and all the stories that tell us that we can't have this kind of lifestyle, and unraveling all of those stories that we carry, helping to move through how do I recognize when burnout is starting to coach in? How do I recognize when stress is popping up? How do I actually learn what kind of rest that I need in my life? Because it's not always an 8-hour sleep. I've had plenty of 8-12-hour sleeps and woken up exhausted because the rest that I need is not about sleep. So I guess it's about tuning into all of those different needs that women have.
That is so interesting about the sleep, because I had a ton of family over the weekend, aunts, uncles, cousins once removed, sisters. It was nuts over here. And it was for several, like 3 days in a row. And I'm an introvert. That is hard mode for me.
I'll suck it, yeah.
And I slept for like 12 hours, and I woke up and I still had company over at that point. And I'm like, I'm still exhausted. Like, I have physical energy, but I am exhausted. And I wouldn't have thought of like the kind of rest that I need is actually quiet time.
It's social rest, right? So we sometimes need more connection, but sometimes, and similarly, I get really, like, I love people, I love connecting, but I find it so draining. So making so that we built in time to go, hey, I actually need to step away, and escape my family for the next hour so I can have a little lay down and just be without them, and that's okay. But it's completely different, right? That sleep was not going to give you what you needed in that moment.
Another really interesting thing you said is planning your day around when your energy tends to be high and low. It took me a really long time to figure it out, but I finally figured out what my daily energy rhythms are. And I think, like women, we often hear about, your monthly rhythms and don't plan social engagements for this phase of the moon, and, plan all of your social media for that phase. Like that's kind of in the culture now. But my daily energy is super important and mostly predictable. And I have my focused energy in the morning. I've got to do my focused work then. And I used to cram my mornings with meetings. And the meetings give me energy, but they drain me really fast afterwards. So they're great for the afternoon, but it's taken me like a decade to figure that out. So when you're working with your clients, what is your process of talking them through figuring out their energy and why they're tired, and maybe how to be less tired?
I love to use different tools. So there's I'm struggling to think of the name of it. I will pull it out afterwards, but it's like an energy app where you actually track morning, evening, and however often you want, you track. It's a mood meter. So you track your mood, and you can write little notes, and it's got like different quadrants for your energy and your mood. And I guess it just sort of helps to paint a picture of what does that look like over a week period, over a month period. And it's kind of a really nice way, I just of connecting into how you're feeling. So some people are into journaling, some people aren't. So this might be like a different tool that can be used to just track how you're feeling, how you're going energetically.
I am so excited about that. You have no idea what a nerd I am for tracking my energy and mood. I created a huge spreadsheet and I would just do little notes. I would track mood and energy in relation to cycle, in relation to moon phase. I started trying to make correlations with weather because I had a theory that I would get summer sad when it was too hot and sunny. Yeah, I got really, really into it. And I did it for 3 years. And what I learned is that my mood, my level of happiness is remarkably steady. It had like a couple of hiccups. Huge life events would have happened. Like my father died, like right in the middle of this tracking. And that was like a month of grieving, of actually feeling sad and depressed. And then the levels went right back to normal. And I realized how resilient I actually am. There's so much power in that information. And the fact that there's an app for that now, oh my God.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And it like sort of looks at like what a high energy, low mood, low energy, high mood. And it's sort of in 4 different quadrants. And I really like it because it helps us to start using language about how we're feeling as well. So I really hate that when we're like, hey, how are you? Good, thanks. How are you? Good, thanks. And we all just have the same response, because wouldn't it be terrible if we just went, you know what? I'm feeling really agitated this afternoon. Like no one responds that, do they? Getting language to be like, I want to actually start connecting with people more deeply. So I often I'm trying to get a pattern with people where I don't say, how are you? I say, how are you feeling today? And it sort of jolts people to go, oh, I don't know. Let me think. And they actually give me a response that's real rather than good, thanks. How are you?
I love that. I'm very into real responses.
Yeah. I did it with my partner because he was driving me nuts with it because, he's far less emotional than me. So I got him to use the Mood Meter app for quite some time to increase his language around how he responded to me.
Right. Like, what would you do if someone was like, I'm agitated today? Like, thank you for asking.
We still have kind of a running joke where they're like, he loved the word content. So he's like, I'm content. How are you? That's one of the ones on there. Like, I'm feeling quite content. And so it's just really interesting, one, to look at, okay, what are my patterns of how I'm feeling and how I might be showing up to other people, but also increasing our language when we're talking to other people to sort of connect with them in a real way.
Yeah. Wow. I can't believe you did it for 3 years, Lauren. That's incredible.
So I don't journal. I hate journaling with a passion. For a writer, I really don't like writing. So it was perfect because I could just sort of tick boxes and put a number score and maybe make a note of what, like, context of what was happening that day. And that was it. And I apparently can do that.
Do you have any other tips for just when people get into that frenzy cycle and they need to find new ways to take a step back?
I think we overcomplicate it and sort of go, I need to go on this, like, I need to take a week's holiday, or I need to go on a weekend long retreat, or I need to do all these big things to take care of ourselves. If we can literally just go, you know what, I'm going to put the tech down half an hour, 15 minutes before bed, if we're literally using it into the last minute, that's a shift. If we can try and take our breaks away from our desk, that's a shift. It can be tiny little pockets of supporting our own well-being that they add up. It doesn't have to be the big grand yoga retreat weekend to actually have a shift in our well-being in a positive direction.
Yeah, that's great. I need to see my bowl here. I'm bad. I get the horseback riding and then I rush back and I'm like, oh crap, I need to feed myself before I do something else. But I could schedule that all better and make sure I'm stepped away still.
And like, so I've seen a few things recently, and it's really got me thinking just how particularly parents, but just people in general coming home to partners or roommates, we come home from this huge day and we don't just take 2 to 5 minutes in the car to decompress before we take all that manic energy of the day into our house. And then we carry it into our evening and we project that onto our partner, children, roommates. So actually just taking 2 to 5 minutes, put your favorite song on, take a few deep breaths, I love when I'm really stressed, I love to do a particular thing because it physiologically tells my brain to calm down. So I kind of take all of my body, squeeze it really, really tight for 30 seconds and then release. And I just feel this like feeling where that's enough for me just to reset.
All right. Are we ready for the final question?
Oh yeah, sorry, that time went by fast. Yeah.
I know, it really did.
All right, so Stephanie, what would you tell your entrepreneur self when you were just transitioning away from your job in child protective services and sort of getting into this working for yourself? What would be something that you want to tell that baby entrepreneur version of you?
Yeah. I think that there was like a level of naivety for me going into business. And I think that I'd want my baby entrepreneur self to know it's going to be a roller coaster and it's going to be really hard, but it's also going to be the most meaningful change that you've ever made in your life. And it's going to bring about the kind of work that you really want to be doing, and the lifestyle that you really want to have is possible with that kind of work.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your slow living tips. I think it's just something that we all need to remember to put more front and center as we're building the businesses to give us the lives that we want, that's a part of it.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing.